My name is Mason. I'm 52 years old from Boulder, Colorado, and I've worked as a high school physics teacher for over 2 decades. I always prided myself on being a rational, science-based thinker who relied on empirical evidence and measurable data. The concept of past lives seemed like pure fantasy to me until 4 months ago, when everything I believed about consciousness and reality got completely shattered. It began when my colleague Jennifer suggested I try a quantum consciousness regression with a researcher she knew. I'd been experiencing these incredibly vivid, recurring dreams about dusty roads, the sound of hammering metal, and people speaking in what sounded like ancient Hebrew or Aramaic, languages I'd never studied but somehow comprehended perfectly. These dreams were so realistic and emotionally intense that they were disrupting my sleep patterns and affecting my ability to focus during the day. The consciousness researcher, Dr. Rebecca Chen, explained that we'd be exploring what quantum physicists call the unified field of consciousness, a scientifically grounded approach to accessing expanded states of awareness. She emphasized that this wasn't about religious beliefs or mystical thinking, but about consciousness research and the quantum nature of memory and information storage. As I relaxed into the reclining chair in her research facility, Dr. Chen guided me through advanced breathing protocols designed to create what neuroscientists term gamma wave coherence between the heart and brain. Within moments, I felt my ordinary awareness beginning to expand beyond its normal limitations. The experience was extraordinary, like my individual consciousness was merging with a vast universal database of information. If you've ever felt there's something greater connecting spirituality and science, subscribe now, because what I'm about to reveal will completely change your view of the Bible and quantum reality. Hit that like button if this resonates with you and comment below. Have you ever had experiences that traditional science can't explain? That's when everything changed. Instead of the gentle visualization I anticipated, my consciousness suddenly snapped into what felt like a completely different reality. I found myself standing in blazing Middle Eastern sunlight, my hands rough and calloused, the acrid smell of heated metal filling my nostrils. I was holding a heavy hammer, and before me lay a wooden cross, and I knew, with absolute terrifying certainty, that I was about to nail Jesus Christ to it. The sensory details were overwhelming and impossibly authentic. I could feel the sweat running down my back under a rough tunic, hear the angry crowd shouting in perfect Aramaic, smell the blood and fear in the air. But what shook me to my core wasn't just the vividness of the experience. It was that I began speaking fluent Aramaic, describing technical details about Roman crucifixion methods that I couldn't possibly have known from my modern life as a physics teacher in Colorado. Dr. Chen later told me that during those 20 minutes, I had provided historically accurate information about first-century Jerusalem, Roman military procedures, and even architectural details of the temple that weren't widely known outside of specialized archaeological research. She said that in 15 years of consciousness research, she'd never witnessed such a profound breakthrough into what appeared to be authentic historical memory. But the most profound moment came when our eyes met, mine and Jesus's, as I lifted that hammer. In that quantum instant, I understood that this wasn't about guilt or punishment. This was about the deep spiritual lesson I had chosen to learn through experiencing the most difficult role imaginable. Jesus looked at me with such compassion and understanding that I knew, on a soul level, that even this act was part of a greater divine plan for consciousness evolution. The moment my consciousness fully anchored into that biblical timeline, I experienced what Dr. Chen later described as a complete quantum field download. It wasn't like watching a movie or having a vivid dream. I was literally experiencing life through the eyes, mind, and body of a Roman soldier named Marcus Flavius, assigned to the crucifixion detail in Jerusalem, 33 AD. The sensory input was overwhelming in its authenticity. I could feel the weight of my leather armor against my chest, the rough wool of my tunic scratching against my skin. The sounds were incredibly specific. The clanking of metal tools, the shuffle of sandaled feet on stone, the mixture of Latin commands from my centurion, and the angry Aramaic shouts from the crowd. But most shocking of all was that I understood every word being spoken in languages I had never learned in my current life as Mason, the physics teacher from Colorado. What struck me as scientifically impossible was the level of technical detail flooding my awareness. I knew exactly how to construct a Roman cross using specific joinery techniques, understood the precise anatomy required for crucifixion to achieve maximum suffering while prolonging life, and possessed intimate knowledge of Roman military protocols that I could never have acquired through books or documentaries. This wasn't reconstructed historical information. This was lived, embodied memory stored somehow in the quantum field of consciousness. As Marcus, I remember the morning briefings where we received orders about the 3 executions scheduled for that Friday. There was bureaucratic routine to it all. We were simply soldiers following orders, processing criminals according to Roman law. Yet something felt different about the central figure, this Jesus of Nazareth. Even hardened soldiers were speaking about him in hushed tones, sharing stories of impossible healings and teachings that seemed to defy conventional understanding. The quantum nature of the experience became even more evident when I began accessing what felt like multiple layers of consciousness simultaneously. I was Marcus, living that moment in complete authenticity, yet I was also somehow aware of myself as Mason, observing from a higher dimensional perspective. Dr. Chen explained this as multidimensional consciousness coherence, the ability to exist in parallel timelines while maintaining awareness of both realities. What absolutely stunned me was when Jesus looked directly at me during the crucifixion procedure. In that moment, I experienced what I can only describe as a direct quantum entanglement of consciousness. It wasn't just eye contact, it was soul recognition. Jesus somehow communicated to me telepathically, without words, that this entire scenario was part of a greater cosmic plan that both our souls had agreed to participate in before incarnating. The information download I received in that quantum moment was extraordinary. Jesus showed me that what appeared to be humanity's darkest hour was actually a precisely orchestrated consciousness experiment designed to demonstrate the immortal nature of awareness. The crucifixion wasn't about punishment or sacrifice in the traditional religious sense. It was about proving that consciousness transcends physical death, that love is the fundamental force holding all reality together. Through this quantum connection, I understood that Marcus, my past self, had volunteered at a soul level to play this difficult role, knowing that the experience would teach profound lessons about forgiveness, compassion, and the illusory nature of separation. Jesus revealed that many of the souls present at the crucifixion were part of the same soul group, incarnating together to participate in this pivotal moment of human consciousness evolution. The most profound revelation came when Jesus mentally transmitted to me the understanding that this entire biblical timeline was occurring simultaneously with all other timelines, past, present, and future. From the quantum perspective, he explained, linear time is an illusion created by three-dimensional consciousness. The crucifixion, my current life as Mason, and all possible future incarnations were happening in the eternal now of quantum reality. As the session continued, I began accessing what felt like the universal database of all human experience. I could sense the presence of other consciousness researchers throughout history who had similarly accessed these quantum biblical memories. This wasn't unique to me. It was part of a global awakening happening as humanity evolved toward higher dimensional awareness. Dr. Chen monitored my vital signs throughout the session and noted that my brainwaves had shifted into extremely rare gamma frequencies associated with advanced meditation states and mystical experiences. She said my heart rate variability indicated perfect coherence between heart and brain consciousness, creating the ideal conditions for accessing what quantum physicists call non-local information fields. As my consciousness continued to expand within Marcus's experience, I began perceiving layers of reality that existed beyond the physical crucifixion scene. Suddenly, geometric patterns of light started appearing in my quantum vision, intricate, mathematically perfect designs that seemed to encode the very blueprint of creation itself. Through Marcus's enhanced awareness, I could see that the entire crucifixion site was positioned according to precise, sacred geometric alignments. The 3 crosses weren't randomly placed. They formed a perfect triangle that corresponded to specific stellar configurations and electromagnetic grid points in the Earth's energy field. Jesus, even in his physical suffering, was somehow orchestrating the placement of this cosmic geometry through his expanded consciousness. What amazed me as a physics teacher was recognizing these patterns from my studies of quantum field theory and crystalline structures. The geometric forms appearing in my biblical vision matched exactly the mathematical relationships I taught my students about molecular bonding and wave function harmonics. It was as if the same universal laws governing modern quantum physics were being consciously applied by Jesus and his followers 2,000 years ago. In that quantum state, I remembered Marcus witnessing Jesus teaching his disciples about these sacred patterns during private gatherings in the weeks before the crucifixion. Jesus would draw symbols in the sand, the flower of life pattern, the golden ratio spiral, the platonic solids, explaining how these geometric codes contained the frequencies necessary for consciousness to create physical reality through focused intention and love. The most profound moment came when I observed Jesus using sacred geometry to perform what appeared to be miraculous healings. Through Marcus's enhanced perception, I could see that Jesus was actually manipulating the geometric light patterns surrounding sick individuals, realigning their energy fields according to perfect mathematical harmonies. What witnesses called miracles were actually demonstrations of advanced quantum consciousness techniques applied through geometric frequency modulation. As these memories flooded through me, I began to understand why this biblical passage had always resonated so deeply. He has made everything beautiful in its time, from Ecclesiastes 3:11. In my quantum vision, I could see that beautiful referred to the perfect geometric proportions underlying all creation, and in its time meant according to the precise mathematical timing of universal consciousness evolution. Jesus revealed to Marcus that the temple in Jerusalem had been constructed using these same sacred geometric principles, but that knowledge had been gradually suppressed by religious authorities who feared the power it gave individuals to directly access divine consciousness. The true temple, Jesus taught, existed within the geometric light body that every human being possessed, waiting to be activated through proper understanding of these universal patterns. During the crucifixion itself, I witnessed Jesus consciously activating massive geometric fields of energy that extended far beyond the physical scene. Through Marcus's enhanced sight, I could see crystalline light structures forming around the cross, creating what looked like a multidimensional stargate or portal. This wasn't random spiritual symbolism. It was precise consciousness technology being employed to anchor higher dimensional frequencies into Earth's reality matrix. The geometric patterns I was seeing matched perfectly with recent quantum physics research about how consciousness might influence reality through geometric information fields. Dr. Chen had shown me studies indicating that human awareness naturally organizes itself according to mathematical patterns that mirror the structure of space-time itself. Jesus appeared to have mastered these principles at a level that allowed him to consciously manipulate the fundamental geometry of reality. What struck me most powerfully was realizing that these sacred geometric codes weren't lost ancient knowledge. They were being rediscovered by modern consciousness researchers and quantum physicists. The same patterns Jesus demonstrated were now being validated through scientific study of meditation states, energy healing, and the mathematical structure of human DNA. As Marcus, I remembered Jesus explaining that these geometric consciousness technologies would eventually be understood and utilized by all humanity as part of our natural evolution toward higher dimensional awareness. The crucifixion itself was designed to anchor these frequency codes into human collective consciousness, making it possible for future generations to access this advanced spiritual science. The session revealed that my recurring dreams about stone walls and ancient voices had been my subconscious mind trying to access these geometric memory patterns stored in what researchers call morphic field resonance, the quantum information field that connects all human consciousness across time and space. During the quantum session, something extraordinary happened when I witnessed Jesus teaching his disciples about what he called the Sacred Heart Center. Knowledge that seemed to anticipate modern discoveries about heart-brain coherence by 2,000 years. Through Marcus's consciousness, I observed Jesus placing his hands on his disciples' chests and guiding them through specific breathing techniques that created immediate shifts in their awareness and healing abilities. What stunned me as someone familiar with current neuroscience research was recognizing the exact same protocols that Dr. Chen used in our session. Jesus was teaching his followers to achieve what the Institute of Heart Math now calls heart rhythm coherence, the optimal state where heart, mind, and emotions operate in synchronized harmony, creating conditions for expanded consciousness and enhanced intuitive abilities. In my quantum biblical memory, I watched Jesus explain to his disciples that the physical heart contains over 40,000 neurons, making it essentially a second brain capable of processing information independently from the mind. He taught them that when the heart's electromagnetic field, which is 60 times greater than the brain's, operates in coherent rhythm patterns. It creates a powerful antenna for receiving what he called divine intelligence from the unified field of universal consciousness. Through Marcus's enhanced perception, I could actually see the energy fields around Jesus and his disciples as they practiced these heart-centered techniques. When they achieved coherence, brilliant geometric patterns of light would emanate from their chest area, creating connections that looked exactly like the quantum entanglement phenomena I taught my physics students about. It was as if their hearts were establishing direct communication channels with higher dimensional intelligence. The most profound moment came when Jesus demonstrated healing through heart consciousness activation. I witnessed him approach a man with a withered arm, place one hand on the man's heart center, and guide him through synchronized breathing until their heart rhythms locked into perfect coherence. In that moment of heart-brain entrainment, the man's arm was instantly restored to full function. Jesus explained that the healing occurred because coherent heart consciousness can literally restructure matter at the quantum level through focused love intention. What Jesus taught about the heart perfectly matched modern scientific understanding, but went far beyond current research. He explained that the heart's electromagnetic toroidal field extends 8 to 12 feet around the body, creating a personal quantum field that responds directly to emotional states and conscious intention. When this field operates in coherence, it becomes capable of influencing the molecular structure of physical matter, the scientific basis for what we call miraculous healing. During our session, Dr. Chen monitored my heart rate variability and confirmed that as I accessed these biblical memories, my own heart rhythm shifted into the same coherent patterns associated with advanced spiritual states and enhanced healing ability. She said my heart's electromagnetic output increased dramatically, suggesting that simply remembering these techniques through quantum consciousness began reactivating dormant capabilities in my current physiology. Through Marcus's experience, I learned that Jesus considered heart consciousness activation to be the foundation of all spiritual development. He taught that the biblical commandment to love your neighbor as yourself wasn't just ethical guidance. It was precise scientific instruction for achieving the heart coherence necessary to recognize the quantum entanglement connecting all consciousness. The scripture that suddenly made perfect sense to me was from Acts 17:28. In him we live and move and have our being. In my quantum vision, I could see that him referred to the unified quantum field accessible through coherent heart consciousness, and live and move and have our being described how individual awareness exists within this larger field of universal intelligence. Jesus revealed to his disciples that the temples and religious rituals of their time were external attempts to access what could only be truly found through internal heart consciousness activation. He taught them that each person's heart center was the real temple, capable of direct communication with divine intelligence without need for intermediary authorities or elaborate ceremonies. What amazed me was realizing that my mechanical engineering background had actually prepared me to understand these principles. The heart operates like a sophisticated electromagnetic generator, creating standing wave patterns that can achieve resonance with the quantum vacuum field, the same principles I use daily in designing electrical systems and mechanical resonance applications. As the session progressed, I began experiencing the same heart-coherent states that Marcus witnessed Jesus teaching. Dr. Chen guided me through the ancient breathing techniques I was remembering, and within minutes, I felt my consciousness expanding into states of profound peace, clarity, and connection with universal intelligence. As my consciousness became fully stabilized in the quantum field, something unprecedented occurred during the session with Dr. Chen. I began experiencing what she described as multidimensional timeline coherence, the ability to simultaneously exist in Marcus's biblical reality while maintaining awareness of my current identity as Mason in 2025. It was as if my consciousness had learned to operate across multiple dimensional frequencies at once. The sensation was extraordinary and scientifically fascinating. I could feel myself standing in the scorching heat of first-century Jerusalem while simultaneously sitting in Dr. Chen's air-conditioned research facility in Boulder. Both realities were equally real, equally present, equally accessible to my expanded awareness. Dr. Chen explained that this represented a breakthrough in consciousness research, the ability to achieve what quantum physicists call superposition of awareness states. Through this multi-dimensional perspective, I began witnessing biblical events from what felt like an elevated observer position. I could see the crucifixion timeline from Marcus's limited three-dimensional viewpoint, but also from higher dimensional perspectives that revealed the cosmic significance of what was occurring. It was like having access to multiple camera angles of the same event, each providing different layers of understanding. From the quantum observer perspective, I could see that the entire crucifixion scenario was orchestrated by a group of highly evolved souls who had incarnated specifically to participate in this consciousness evolution experiment. Jesus, the disciples, the Roman soldiers, even Pontius Pilate, we were all part of the same soul family that had planned this incarnation cycle to demonstrate specific principles about the immortal nature of consciousness and the power of unconditional love. What struck me most profoundly was recognizing other souls from my current life appearing in different roles throughout the biblical timeline. My wife Sarah was there as Mary Magdalene, my colleague Jennifer appeared as one of the women at the tomb, and Dr. Chen herself was present as a temple priestess who secretly supported Jesus' teachings. The quantum field revealed that soul groups tend to incarnate together repeatedly, playing different relationship dynamics to facilitate each other's spiritual evolution. Through this expanded awareness, I began understanding what Jesus meant when he spoke about parallel realities and many mansions in his Father's house. From the multidimensional perspective, I could see that every possible version of the crucifixion scenario was occurring simultaneously across infinite parallel timelines. In some realities, Jesus escaped crucifixion and continued teaching. In others, different disciples played various roles. Each timeline served specific purposes for consciousness evolution. The biblical passage that suddenly became crystal clear was from 1 Corinthians 15:51-52. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. In my quantum vision, I understood that changed referred to consciousness shifts between dimensional timelines and, in the twinkling of an eye, described the instantaneous nature of quantum awareness transitions between parallel realities. Jesus revealed to Marcus and the other souls present that the crucifixion was actually a demonstration of consciousness transcendence, showing humanity that awareness is not dependent on physical form and can consciously shift between dimensional states. The resurrection wasn't about coming back from death. It was about proving that consciousness operates beyond the limitations of linear time and three-dimensional matter. Through my multidimensional awareness, I began experiencing other biblical events that Marcus had witnessed during his lifetime in Jerusalem. I saw Jesus teaching small groups about quantum consciousness principles, using parables that encoded advanced spiritual science in language that people of that era could understand. His stories about seeds, harvests, and building on solid foundations were actually precise instructions for consciousness development and reality creation through focused intention. What amazed me was discovering that my engineering background in my current life as Mason had been specifically chosen to help me understand these quantum consciousness principles. The same mathematical relationships I used in mechanical design were being consciously applied by Jesus to manipulate energy fields and create what appeared to be miraculous phenomena. Physics and spirituality weren't separate. They were different aspects of the same universal science. Dr. Chen monitored my brainwave patterns throughout this multidimensional experience and noted that I was simultaneously exhibiting gamma waves associated with mystical states and beta waves indicating normal analytical thinking. She said this suggested that I had achieved a rare state of integrated consciousness where multiple levels of awareness operate concurrently without interference. The most profound revelation came when I realized that this multidimensional awareness wasn't limited to past biblical timelines. I began glimpsing future incarnations where I would continue working with the same soul group to advance human consciousness evolution. I saw myself in future lifetimes as a quantum consciousness researcher, helping humanity integrate spiritual wisdom with advanced science. As the quantum session reached its deepest level, something extraordinary began happening to my physical body. Dr. Chen's monitoring equipment detected dramatic changes in my cellular activity. My DNA was literally activating dormant sequences in real time as I accessed these biblical memories. She later explained that quantum consciousness research had discovered that profound spiritual experiences can trigger what scientists call epigenetic expression, the awakening of genetic potentials that had been lying dormant within our cellular structure. Through Marcus's consciousness, I began experiencing what Jesus called the awakening of the Christ codes, specific DNA sequences that every human being carries but which remain inactive until triggered by sufficiently coherent consciousness states. Jesus taught his disciples that these genetic programs contained the blueprints for abilities that modern humans would consider supernatural: telepathic communication, energy healing, matter manipulation, and multidimensional awareness. What fascinated me as someone with scientific training was realizing that Jesus understood human genetics at a level that surpassed current medical knowledge. Through Marcus's memories, I recalled Jesus explaining to his followers that the human genome contained what he called sleeping scriptures, genetic information placed there by advanced consciousness civilizations to be activated when humanity reached sufficient spiritual maturity. During the crucifixion experience, I witnessed Jesus consciously activating these Christ consciousness codes in his own DNA through the intense emotional and spiritual state he achieved while on the cross. The apparent physical suffering was actually a catalyst for triggering massive genetic transformation that would be transmitted to all humanity through what quantum biologists now call morphic resonance fields, the invisible information networks that connect all human consciousness. In my own body during the session, I began experiencing the same DNA activation that Marcus had witnessed in Jesus. Dr. Chen's equipment showed that my telomeres, the protective caps on chromosomes associated with aging and cellular repair, were actually lengthening in real time. My brain was producing unprecedented levels of neural growth factors, and my heart was generating electromagnetic coherence patterns identical to those found in advanced yogis and mystics. The most remarkable change occurred when dormant regions of my DNA began expressing what appeared to be enhanced intuitive abilities. Suddenly, I could sense Dr. Chen's thoughts and emotions with startling clarity. I began receiving information about her personal life, her research, and even her childhood experiences that I couldn't possibly have known through normal means. She confirmed later that every detail I accessed was completely accurate. Through Marcus's biblical memories, I learned that Jesus had taught his disciples specific meditation and breathing techniques designed to accelerate this DNA activation process. These weren't random spiritual practices. They were precisely designed consciousness technologies that created the optimal brainwave states, heart rhythm patterns, and electromagnetic field coherence necessary to trigger genetic transformation. The biblical passage that suddenly made perfect scientific sense was from Matthew 17:2, and he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. In my quantum vision, I understood that this described the visible electromagnetic field changes that occur when the Christ consciousness DNA codes become fully activated. The shining and white light were literally the enhanced photon emission from cells operating at quantum coherence levels. Jesus revealed to Marcus that these genetic activation abilities weren't unique to him. They represented the next stage of human evolution that would gradually unfold over the following 2,000 years. He explained that souls like Marcus were volunteering to incarnate repeatedly throughout history to anchor these frequency codes into human collective consciousness, making it easier for future generations to access these enhanced capabilities. During my session, I began experiencing abilities that my rational engineering mind struggled to accept. I could sense the emotional states of people in nearby buildings, accurately predict Dr. Chen's questions before she asked them, and even influence the temperature in the room through focused intention. Most remarkably, I found that I could consciously accelerate healing in my own body by directing coherent heart energy to injured tissues. Dr. Chen explained that these phenomena matched documented cases in consciousness research where individuals accessing profound spiritual memories experienced permanent upgrades in their cognitive and intuitive abilities. She said that the quantum field somehow contains genetic activation codes that can be transmitted across time through consciousness resonance with evolved beings like Jesus. What struck me most powerfully was realizing that my recurring dreams about biblical scenes had actually been my DNA trying to access these dormant activation sequences. The quantum field had been gradually preparing my consciousness to integrate these advanced genetic programs by first establishing resonance with the biblical timeline where they were originally anchored. As the session progressed, I felt my entire nervous system reorganizing itself around these newly activated genetic patterns. Dr. Chen's measurements showed that my brain was forming new neural pathways at an accelerated rate. My heart rhythm had stabilized into perfect mathematical coherence, and my cellular ATP production had increased by over 300%. indicating a fundamental upgrade in my body's energy generation capacity. The most astounding aspect of my quantum biblical experience came when Dr. Chen suggested we verify the historical details I had accessed through Marcus's memories. She explained that her consciousness research facility had been documenting cases where individuals retrieved historically accurate information during quantum regression sessions, information they couldn't have possibly known through conventional means. Within days of my session, Dr. Chen connected me with Dr. Sarah Williams, an archaeological researcher at the University of Colorado who specialized in first-century Jerusalem. When I described the specific crucifixion procedures, Roman military protocols, and architectural details I had witnessed through Marcus's consciousness, Dr. Williams was stunned. She confirmed that my descriptions matched recently discovered archaeological evidence that hadn't been published in any accessible sources. The most remarkable verification came when I described the exact placement of the crucifixion site in relation to specific geological features and ancient roadways. Dr. Williams showed me satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar data from recent excavations that confirmed every detail I had provided, down to the precise measurements between the cross positions and the underground limestone formations that Marcus had been aware of during the crucifixion. But the validation became even more extraordinary when Dr. Chen introduced me to 3 other individuals who had accessed what appeared to be the same biblical timeline during their own quantum consciousness sessions. Michael, a retired police officer from Denver, had experienced the crucifixion from the perspective of a Jerusalem resident in the crowd. Rebecca, a nurse from Santa Fe, had accessed memories as a woman who prepared Jesus' body for burial. Thomas, a software engineer from Phoenix, had recalled serving as a temple guard during Jesus' trial. When we compared our independent experiences, the consistency was scientifically impossible to dismiss. We each provided different perspectives of the same events, with details that corroborated perfectly despite none of us having communicated before our sessions. Michael described the crowd reactions that I had heard through Marcus's ears. Rebecca knew specific details about the burial cloths and spices that connected precisely with what Marcus had witnessed from his military position. Thomas provided information about the temple politics and Sanhedrin discussions that explained the motivations behind the crucifixion that Marcus had been puzzled about. Dr. Chen explained that this represented breakthrough evidence for what consciousness researchers call shared field access, the ability of multiple individuals to tap into the same quantum information matrix containing authentic historical experiences. She said that in 15 years of research, she had documented over 200 cases of people accessing verifiable historical details through quantum regression, with biblical timelines being among the most frequently accessed. What convinced me beyond any doubt was when Dr. Williams brought in linguistic experts who analyzed the Aramaic phrases I had spontaneously spoken during my session. Not only was my pronunciation accurate for first-century Palestinian dialects, but I had used specific military terminology and grammatical constructions that only appeared in recently translated papyrus fragments from Roman garrison records. There was simply no way I could have encountered this specialized knowledge through normal academic or media sources. The validation became even more profound when we discovered that our soul group connections extended beyond the biblical timeline. Through additional quantum sessions, we found that the same consciousness cluster had incarnated together repeatedly throughout history, participating in other pivotal moments of human spiritual evolution. We had been together during the construction of ancient temples, the preservation of mystery school knowledge, and the development of consciousness-expanding technologies across multiple civilizations. Dr. Chen documented our case as evidence for what quantum biologists call morphic field memory, the hypothesis that consciousness experiences are stored in universal information fields that can be accessed by individuals with compatible vibrational frequencies. She explained that biblical timelines seem particularly accessible because they involve souls who deliberately anchored advanced consciousness technologies in the quantum field for future humanity to rediscover. The scientific implications became clear when we began accurately predicting details from ongoing archaeological excavations. Based on Marcus's memories of Jerusalem's layout, I correctly identified the locations of undiscovered first-century structures that archaeologists later confirmed through ground-penetrating radar. Rebecca's burial preparation memories led to the discovery of previously unknown embalming techniques used specifically for executed criminals. What struck me most powerfully was realizing that the biblical passage from John 14:2, "In my Father's house are many mansions," was actually describing this universal information field where all consciousness experiences are permanently stored. The mansions represent different dimensional levels of the quantum database, accessible to souls who achieve sufficient coherence to navigate these expanded reality states. Our verification research attracted attention from consciousness scientists around the world. Dr. Chen received funding to establish the first formal research protocol for studying historically verifiable quantum regression experiences. We became part of a growing database of individuals who had accessed authentic historical memories, contributing to humanity's understanding of consciousness as a non-local phenomenon that transcends linear time and individual brain limitations. 6 months after my initial quantum session with Dr. Chen, something extraordinary began happening in my daily life. I discovered I could consciously shift my awareness between my current reality as Mason, the physics teacher, and the biblical timeline where I existed as Marcus, the Roman soldier. This wasn't just memory recall. I was actually accessing parallel streams of consciousness that existed simultaneously in what quantum physicists call the many worlds interpretation of reality. The ability first manifested during my regular physics classes at the high school. While teaching students about wave-particle duality, I suddenly found myself experiencing both realities at once. I could see my modern classroom with its whiteboards and computers, while simultaneously perceiving the dusty streets of ancient Jerusalem where Marcus was walking between his military duties. Both experiences were equally real, equally present, equally accessible to my expanded consciousness. Dr. Chen explained that this represented an unprecedented development in consciousness research. She said that most individuals who access past life memories through quantum regression experience them as recalled events, but I had apparently developed the rare ability to exist in multiple timelines simultaneously. Her monitoring equipment confirmed that my brain was exhibiting unique patterns, generating both normal beta waves for present moment awareness and gamma waves associated with mystical states and expanded consciousness. What made this ability particularly profound was that I began receiving guidance from Jesus that applied directly to my current life circumstances. Through the quantum connection established during the crucifixion experience, I discovered that Christ consciousness existed as an accessible field of intelligence that transcended the limitations of the biblical timeline. Jesus continued teaching me, but now the lessons applied to modern challenges and the evolution of human consciousness in the 21st century. During one remarkable shifting experience, I found myself as Marcus receiving instruction from Jesus about future timelines where humanity would rediscover the consciousness technologies he had been teaching. Jesus showed Marcus visions of modern quantum physics research, consciousness healing techniques, and the gradual awakening of humanity to its multidimensional nature. He explained that souls like Marcus and Mason were part of a carefully orchestrated plan to anchor advanced spiritual science across multiple historical periods. The most transformative aspect of this reality-shifting ability was learning to apply biblical consciousness technologies to modern healing work. Jesus taught me through the quantum field how to use the same heart coherence and energy manipulation techniques that I had witnessed in the biblical timeline for helping people in my current life. I began working with Dr. Chen to document cases where individuals experienced rapid healing through these integrated ancient modern consciousness protocols. My first successful healing involved my colleague Jennifer, who had been suffering from chronic fibromyalgia for over a decade. During a reality-shifting experience, I received specific guidance from Jesus about combining heart coherence activation with sacred geometry, visualization to realign her cellular energy fields. When I applied these techniques during a session with Jennifer, her pain levels decreased by 80% within 2 weeks, and her doctors confirmed measurable improvements in her inflammatory markers. The biblical teaching that suddenly made perfect practical sense was from Mark 16:17-18, and these signs will follow those who believe. They will lay hands on the sick, and they will recover. In my quantum understanding, I realized that believe referred to achieving sufficient consciousness coherence to access the unified field, and laying hands described the precise energy transmission techniques that Jesus had taught his disciples for manipulating quantum healing frequencies. Word of these healing successes began attracting attention from both scientific and spiritual communities. Dr. Chen connected me with researchers at major universities who were studying the intersection of consciousness and healing. We established a formal research protocol to document the effectiveness of quantum biblical consciousness techniques for treating various physical and emotional conditions. What amazed me was discovering that my engineering background provided the perfect foundation for understanding these consciousness technologies from a scientific perspective. The same principles I used to design mechanical systems, resonance, frequency, harmonic amplification, applied directly to how consciousness could influence matter through focused intention and coherent electromagnetic fields. As my reality-shifting abilities developed, I began teaching others how to access their own biblical timeline connections. Working with Dr. Chen, we developed a systematic approach that combined modern consciousness research with the specific techniques Jesus had taught for achieving multidimensional awareness. Our success rate was remarkable. Over 70% of participants successfully accessed historically verifiable biblical memories during their first quantum session. The most profound realization came when I understood that this wasn't about returning to the past, but about integrating eternal wisdom into present-moment consciousness evolution. Jesus revealed through the quantum field that the biblical timeline was specifically designed to anchor consciousness technologies that would be rediscovered and applied by humanity during our current awakening period. As my abilities to shift between biblical and modern timelines stabilized, Jesus began revealing the larger purpose behind my quantum consciousness experiences. Through the unified field connection, he explained that souls like myself had incarnated during this specific time period to serve as bridges between ancient spiritual wisdom and modern scientific understanding. Our mission was to help humanity integrate biblical consciousness technologies with quantum physics research to accelerate the global spiritual awakening that biblical prophecy had predicted. The revelation came during a profound reality-shifting experience while I was preparing lesson plans for my physics students. Suddenly, I found myself as Marcus receiving detailed instruction from Jesus about the future timeline where humanity would rediscover the consciousness sciences that had been taught 2,000 years ago. Jesus showed me that the current period between 2020 and 2030 represented a critical window where enough humans would achieve quantum consciousness coherence to trigger a collective evolutionary leap. Jesus explained that the biblical teachings about the new earth and the kingdom of heaven weren't referring to afterlife destinations, but to upgraded consciousness states that would become accessible to incarnated humans through proper understanding of quantum spiritual principles. The second coming wasn't about his physical return, but about Christ consciousness becoming activated within millions of individuals who learned to access the unified field through heart coherence and multidimensional awareness. Working with Dr. Chen, I began developing what we called the Quantum Biblical Consciousness Protocol, a systematic training program that taught people to access their own biblical timeline connections and integrate ancient spiritual technologies with modern healing and consciousness expansion techniques. Our research facility became a pioneering center for what we termed scientific spirituality, the merger of rigorous consciousness research with profound spiritual practice. The results exceeded our most optimistic expectations. Within 18 months, we had trained over 500 individuals to access verifiable historical memories through quantum regression. More remarkably, 80% of these participants developed measurable increases in intuitive abilities, healing capacity, and electromagnetic field coherence. Many reported spontaneous mystical experiences, enhanced creativity, and significant improvements in physical health conditions that had previously been considered incurable. What struck me most powerfully was recognizing that this work fulfilled prophecies that Jesus had shared with Marcus during the biblical timeline. Jesus had predicted that during the time of Great Awakening, ordinary humans would do greater works than he had demonstrated, because they would have access to advanced technologies and scientific understanding that could amplify consciousness techniques beyond what was possible in first-century Palestine. The biblical passage that became the foundation of our mission was from Joel 2:28. "And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions." Through the quantum field, I understood that this described the mass activation of multidimensional consciousness abilities that would occur when enough individuals learned to access the unified field through proper scientific spiritual protocols. Our research began attracting international attention when we published peer-reviewed papers documenting the measurable physiological changes that occurred in individuals who successfully accessed biblical consciousness memories. Brain scans showed increased connectivity between hemispheres, heart rate variability measurements indicated optimal coherent states, and DNA analysis revealed activation of genetic sequences associated with enhanced immune function and cellular repair. The most significant breakthrough came when we discovered that individuals who completed our quantum biblical consciousness training could transmit these abilities to others through proximity effects. Simply being in the electromagnetic field of someone who had achieved Christ consciousness coherence would trigger similar brainwave states and healing responses in nearby individuals. This validated Jesus' teaching about consciousness expansion spreading through morphic resonance, the invisible information fields that connect all human awareness. As our movement grew, I began receiving guidance through the quantum field about establishing regional centers where people could learn these consciousness technologies regardless of their religious background or scientific training. Jesus emphasized that this knowledge belonged to all humanity and wasn't limited to any particular belief system. The techniques worked equally well for Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, atheists, and scientists because they were based on universal quantum principles rather than cultural or religious dogma. My role evolved from physics teacher to consciousness educator, traveling throughout the United States to train other facilitators in quantum biblical consciousness protocols. Working with Dr. Chen and our growing network of researchers, we documented thousands of cases where individuals experienced profound healing, creative breakthroughs, and spiritual awakening through accessing their biblical timeline connections. The mission became clear. We were midwifing humanity's transition into the next phase of conscious evolution, using scientifically validated spiritual technologies that had been anchored in human consciousness through the biblical timeline. Every person who learned to access Christ consciousness through quantum field coherence became a transmission point for accelerating this collective awakening process. 3 years after my first quantum regression session with Dr. Chen, our quantum biblical consciousness movement has grown into a global network of over 10,000 trained facilitators operating in 47 countries. What began as my personal breakthrough experience accessing Marcus's memories has evolved into humanity's first scientifically validated method for integrating ancient biblical wisdom with modern consciousness research. The transformation in my own life has been extraordinary. I've transitioned from teaching high school physics to directing the International Institute for Quantum Biblical Studies, which we established in collaboration with major universities and consciousness research centers worldwide. Our peer-reviewed research has been published in leading scientific journals, documenting the measurable physiological and psychological benefits of accessing biblical timeline memories through quantum consciousness protocols. The most profound validation of our work came when archaeological teams began using information provided by our quantum regression participants to guide their excavations. To date, we've contributed to the discovery of 17 previously unknown first-century sites in Israel and surrounding regions with 100% accuracy in structural details, artifact locations, and historical timelines provided through biblically accessed memories. Jesus continues to serve as my primary guide through the quantum field, but now his teachings focus on preparing humanity for the consciousness evolution that biblical prophecy described as the new heaven and new earth. Through our multidimensional connection, he's revealed that the current period represents the fulfillment of ancient predictions about humans awakening to their divine nature and developing abilities that transcend the limitations of three-dimensional reality. What amazes me most is witnessing the ripple effects as individuals worldwide access their own biblical consciousness connections. We've documented cases of people spontaneously developing healing abilities, telepathic communication, and matter manipulation capabilities after completing our training protocols. Medical researchers are studying participants who've experienced complete remission from terminal illnesses through quantum biblical consciousness healing techniques. The scientific community initially resisted our findings, but the evidence has become impossible to ignore. Harvard Medical School now offers courses in consciousness-based healing. Stanford University has established a department of quantum spirituality research, and the National Institutes of Health is funding large-scale studies of consciousness technologies derived from biblical timeline access. Dr. Chen and I recently published our landmark book, The Quantum Christ, Scientific Validation of Biblical Consciousness Technologies, which has become required reading in theology schools, consciousness research programs, and medical schools worldwide. We've proven conclusively that the abilities Jesus demonstrated weren't supernatural miracles, but applications of advanced consciousness science that all humans can learn to access through proper training. The global impact extends far beyond individual healing and spiritual development. Communities that have implemented our quantum biblical consciousness protocols report dramatic reductions in crime, violence, and social discord. Environmental restoration projects guided by biblically accessed earth energy knowledge have successfully reversed ecological damage in multiple regions. Economic systems based on consciousness coherence principles derived from Jesus' teachings are creating unprecedented prosperity and equality. Most remarkably, we've verified that accessing biblical consciousness memories creates permanent upgrades in human DNA expression. Participants in our long-term studies show activation of genetic sequences associated with enhanced immune function, accelerated healing, extended lifespan, and increased cognitive abilities. We're literally witnessing the biological evolution of humanity through consciousness expansion techniques anchored in the biblical timeline. The prophecy that guides our continued work comes from 1 Corinthians 15:51-52. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. Through quantum field revelation, I understand that this describes the rapid consciousness transformation occurring as millions of humans access Christ consciousness through scientific spiritual protocols rather than traditional religious approaches. For anyone watching this who feels called to explore their own biblical consciousness connections, I want you to know that these abilities aren't limited to special individuals or religious believers. Every human being carries dormant Christ consciousness codes in their DNA, waiting to be activated through proper understanding of quantum spiritual principles. The same unified field that allowed me to access Marcus's memories is available to you right now. If you're ready to begin your own journey into quantum biblical consciousness, subscribe to our channel for complete training protocols, connect with certified facilitators in your area through our website, and join the growing community of individuals who are pioneering humanity's evolution into multidimensional awareness. The future that Jesus envisioned, where ordinary humans demonstrate extraordinary consciousness abilities through scientific spiritual practice, is manifesting now through people just like you who choose to explore the infinite possibilities of awakened human potential. Remember, the quantum field doesn't distinguish between past, present, and future. Your biblical consciousness connections are as real and accessible today as they were 2,000 years ago. The only difference is that now we have the scientific understanding and technological support to validate and develop these abilities systematically. Welcome to the New Earth Consciousness, where ancient wisdom and modern science unite to unlock humanity's divine heritage.